Greetings. How many of you know what snookering means? It's a term used when you're playing billiards and you try to run the table. And sometimes there's an impossible shot to make. So you have to snooker a shot in order to be able to make a shot or receive the best possible chance to win. In the Old Testament, we have a situation where a famous biblical figure tried to snooker God. And it has to do with asking God for something. There's a lot of Christians that don't accept the word no from the Lord when we're asking Him for something. Moses prayed, "I pray thee, let me go over and see the good land that is beyond the Jordan, and that goodly mountain and Lebanon," in Deuteronomy 3:25. Can you imagine asking the Lord for something and He actually gets angry about what you asked? Can you imagine the Lord telling you to shut up or to speak no more unto me of this matter, according to Deuteronomy 3:26? Moses tried to snooker the Lord into letting him go into the promised land. How did he do that? He said, "O Lord, thou hast begun to show thy servant thy greatness and thy mighty hand. For what God is there in heaven or in earth who can do according to thy works and according to thy might?" Deuteronomy 3:24. Moses told God how great He was. He told God how mighty He was. He told God He could do anything according to thy might. And he was asking God to change what God told Moses would not happen. Moses sinned against the Lord. This was not some besetting sin or habit he couldn't control. He disobeyed the Lord and put the Lord to open shame. He struck the rock twice instead of just once, according to Numbers chapter 20, verses 11 to 12. Moses struck the rock twice in unbelief. "Because ye believed me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them." Think about this. Israel that came out of Egypt died in the wilderness because they did not believe God would deliver them or defeat them, defeat the giants before them and deliver them from the giants. Besides Moses, only Joshua and Caleb were left from the original group that came out of Egypt under the blood from Pharaoh. Moses saw the miracles and might of God. He was faithful in his own house before the Lord. But Moses did something that disqualified him from entering the promised land. Moses knew his sin potentially would harm others from receiving the promises of God. Moses was allowed to see the promised land, but that was not the same as going into it and possessing the land. This is not about if Moses was saved, lost his salvation, or became the reason others who were saved out of Egypt under the blood lost their salvation. Some people would try to turn this into a thing like that. The issue is serving the Lord, believing His word as an example for the house of God under the Lord. That's the issue. It's a question of serving the Lord. It's not about salvation. Moses told Israel, I can't go over into the land because of you. He wasn't saying it was Israel's fault. He was accepting accountability for his sin against the Lord at the waters of Meribah in Numbers chapter 20, verse 24. God used Moses to show his people they could suffer loss for rebellion, for unbelief in their walk, even though belonging to the Lord, even though they were saved out of Egypt under the blood. This is highly applicable to the church, the body of Christ, saved under the blood from a devil's hell. The judgment seat of Christ will expose the unbelief and rebellion of believers. Some will not be allowed to rule and reign with the Lord in the kingdom to come on earth. They will see the kingdom, but will not be able to be partakers of ruling and reigning in the kingdom. Who thinks being saved will be enough reason for the Lord to allow all the saved to rule and reign with Him in the millennium? Will we be those at the judgment seat of Christ who try to snooker God to get Him to let us be a part of the kingdom age to come? Guess what? It didn't work for Moses, and it won't work for us.